Hello everyone. This is my second project on the Framingham Heart Study dataset. This is a continuation of my first project. Now I am presenting a Power BI dashboard. To recap from my first project, this dataset contains 4,082 patients, 16 columns such as gender, age, cholesterol, blood pressure, body mass index, diabetes, among others. The target variable is predicting the 10-year risk of heart disease. This dataset can be found at this link. From my first project, I found that age and blood pressure variables have a weak positive correlation to the risk of developing heart disease. Also, education level is not correlated to the risk of developing this condition. For this project, I built a dashboard in Power BI to investigate more about the age and blood pressure variables. Now let's look at the Power BI visualizations. I started with this pie chart to provide a general idea about the target variable distribution. At first glance, we see that the no-risk group, green area, is overrepresented in the dataset. So we have 85% of patients classified as no risk of heart disease, and we have 15% of patients classified as at risk of heart disease, so the blue area. Next, the hypertension distribution. Hypertension means high blood pressure. This visualization shows that 69% of the patients have no hypertension and 31% of the patients have high blood pressure. The next visualization is a 100% stacked bar chart. We see here that each bar represents a hypertension group. So this bar corresponds to patients with no hypertension, and this bar corresponds to patients with high blood pressure. Each bar is also segmented into patients with risk of heart disease, the blue area, and patients with no risk of heart disease, the green area. So we see that in the high blood pressure group, this bar, the percentage of patients with risk of heart disease is 25%, which is higher than in this group, with 10.83% of patients who have risk of developing heart disease. In this visualization here, we can see a comparison of the average systolic blood pressure for these two groups. This group corresponds to the patients with risk of developing heart disease, and this group corresponds to the patients with no risk of developing heart disease. So each group is also segmented into females and males. So the average systolic blood pressure is higher in this group of patients, so the patients with risk of heart disease, than in the patients with no risk of heart disease. Also, we see that females have a little bit higher average systolic blood pressure than males. So here we have, this is the group, this is the risk group, the gender is female, and the average systolic blood pressure is 146.71. And the same group, risk group, but this is for males, and the average systolic blood pressure is 141.07. And now we have the group, the no-risk group, females. The average systolic blood pressure is 131.02, and for males is 129.2. So now here we have the histogram, age histogram, and each group is segmented into people with risk of heart disease, the blue area, and green area is for patients with no risk of heart disease. So this is the 30 to 35 years old group, and it has a very low percentage of patients with risk of heart disease, and it's even very hard to see. So in the next group, this percentage increases to 5.87% and then increases more in the next group to 8.59%. And in this group, it almost doubles to 15.07%. And in this group, this is the group of 51 to 55 years old, the percentage of people with risk of developing heart disease is almost 18%. In the next group is almost 24%, and the next group 26%. And in this group, that corresponds to patients with 65 to 70 years old. The percentage is almost 40% of patients with risk of heart disease. So finally, this is the key influencers analysis. This visual helps identify important factors in the data by analyzing the relationships between different variables and detecting which variables are most strongly associated with a particular outcome. In this case, we want to know which variables influence the 10-year risk of heart disease. For instance, we see here that the diastolic blood pressure, when the diastolic blood pressure is higher, is more than 110.5, the likelihood of 10-year heart disease risk increases by 3.09 times. So to have a better idea of what this number means, diastolic blood pressure is considered normal under 80. So this is a high number, so this is a high blood pressure. So we have here that when systolic blood pressure is more than 170.5, the likelihood of 10-year heart disease risk increases by 2.76 times. So also, to understand this number, systolic blood pressure is considered normal under 120. So this is also a high blood pressure. Next, we have age. When age is more than 60.5, the likelihood increases by 2.73. And in this group, 51 to 60.5, the likelihood increases by 2 times. So this is consistent with the histogram. When we see these age groups have a higher percentage of patients with risk of heart disease. And here we have more segments of the blood pressure variables that have also influence in the risk of developing heart disease. To conclude, these visualizations suggest that age and blood pressure variables affect the risk of developing heart disease, and also the likelihood of developing heart disease increases in individuals over 50 years old and with hypertension. To finish, I want to say that this study is useful for healthcare applications. For instance, identifying risk factors for heart disease such as age and blood pressure can help implement preventive measures to reduce the risk of developing heart disease. And also, healthcare providers can use these insights to design targeted interventions for individuals at higher risk based on their demographic and medical profiles. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.